Well, I'll start with a philosophical question. Should I say good afternoon or good evening? I'm not sure when evening starts. But anyway, I'm going to say good afternoon. I'm David Darling. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. It seems very quiet from here. I'm David Darling, Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Science, and it is a little late in the day, but nevertheless, a very warm welcome to the R&D Showcase, our 12th. Before I forget, and I frequently do, I'm going to say my thank yous first to several groups of people who made today such a success. It was a great day. You've all heard me, at least if you're a SEAS regular, you've heard me talk about the SEAS Orchestra, how there's no way to present a score and make it really wonderful if we don't behave like an orchestra. So, there's the violinist in the front row, like Dr. Plesniak here. There's the trombone player. Reg, do you play a trombone? No. And most orchestras have somebody at the back who whacks a triangle every 20 minutes, right? But seriously, it takes an orchestra, it takes a village, and I want to thank everybody. First of all, though, in specific thanks to all the students and the faculty mentors. You've done a phenomenal job. I hear it from our alums. They say the quality of the work seems to go up every year. And I agree with that. We've really seen some great work. Thanks to all our judges who are alums, friends of the school, faculty, and they've worked diligently reviewing from starting point the abstracts to multiple poster reviews to quizzing students. And I want to thank in particular the two lead judges, Professors Kaushik Sarkar and Matt Kay. Are they here? I think they're still out arguing about the judging. Their pictures are here. Since they're not here, I want to say they did a very impressive job in organizing this, so I'm going to appoint them to more committees in the school, so they'll appreciate that. And thanks to everybody who worked behind the scenes on this, because there's a lot of logistics for this event that has to happen in sequence and be on time. And I think today that group made it look effortless and fairly easy, but it isn't. It takes a lot of hard work. In particular, I want to thank John Coleman, our Associate Dean for Research over there, and Sandra Little, my assistant, and Mike Vidok, who does a lot of work all year long on this event. I don't have time to go over a lot of the history here, but each year, because we have new students and new alums, I just want to say a few words about the history of this showcase. So this is largely for the benefit of the students. The faculty here have heard me repeat myself many times. I apologize. The first showcase was 2007. This is the 12th then. And at that time, there were 47 posters. There were 3 judges and $1,000 in prizes. Over the years, the number of participants has grown, the categories have grown to include experimental work, theoretical work. We've got a growing undergraduate component in the school now because of the focus on undergraduate research. The number of judges this year was more than 40. There were 100 posters, give or take 1. And we've added corporate sponsors. The sponsors, prize money is around $30,000, which is going to be distributed very shortly. And if we count the posters that were entered and enrolled in the I-Corps program, Lex McCusker will talk a little bit more about that later, there is about another $51,000 in support to student projects. So it's about $80K. Before I introduce our keynote speaker, I do want to thank our sponsors. So hopefully they're going to appear in the order I have them here. Otherwise, this is going to look terrible, isn't it? Leidos, Gulu Gambhir, who is a SEAS alum and advisory council member, has shepherded Leidos's contributions to this and many other events we have. Revidium is founded by Manny Rivera, who's a SEAS alumnus. Hegarty Research, Aaron Hegarty is in the front row here. He's an advisory council member and a SEAS alum. ISIS Corporation, Ed Ghaffari. I'm not sure if Ed is here. No, he's the founder of this company and a SEAS alum. Richard Stroop, who is the co-founder of Sequoia Holdings, He's not here. He's also an alum. And then GW's Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So thanks to all our sponsors, because we could have an event but no prizes without the sponsors. So they make a lot of difference. I'm pleased now to introduce our keynote speaker. I'm not sure about you, but I find that sometimes when I introduce distinguished alums and distinguished supporters of the school, I often focus on their most recent accomplishments and their awards and the recognition. And that's in fact what is in the bio sketch on the inside back page of your program. But I sometimes wonder, well, how did they get from being a lowly freshman to being the CEO of some company? And so the recent stuff is in the program, but I want to say a few words about Anirudh Kulkarni, which came out of an article that was written about a week ago in GW Alumni News by one of our development staff, Buthena Shukri, wrote a nice article, and it focused on the beginnings, not where you are now. So I don't think I'm going to embarrass you, but if I do, I'll apologize in advance. But it is in the public domain. So let me start. Studying engineering was not on Anirudh Kulkarni's mind when he began his freshman year at GW in 1982. He wanted to become a doctor, like his father, and go the pre-med route as an undergrad. The elder Kulkarni, that means his dad, his father, actually recognized the tremendous analytic skills of his son and suggested engineering might be better suited to his natural talents. So when Anirudh chanced upon an orientation given by the Operations Research Group here in the school, which is now Department of Engineering Management and Systems Engineering, he was intrigued to learn that real-world problems could be addressed by simulations using mainframe systems. I suspect to a lot of people in this room, the younger people, you don't have a clue what a mainframe system is, right? Were you here for, anybody here for Christine Darden's talk last night? She talked about mainframe systems. These were big computers that were shared by an organization. They did big batch jobs, and everybody lugged around these big boxes of punch cards. So he was intrigued by that. That was state of the art at the time. The orientation he was in spoke to his love of data and analytics and how pure mathematics and applied mathematics could be combined to solve problems. So he declared himself an operations research manager. This is a pun, leaving the other operating table behind. Remember, he was going to be a doctor. So operations could be surgery. I have to explain the jokes. They're too. And he also minored in economics and statistics. During his senior year, he interviewed with a few companies and accepted an offer to work for TRW. A snappy motto about the future, plus the offer to pay for graduate school, kept him with the company for 3 years. And in 1989, at 25 years of age, he left TRW to start his own company, which focused, not surprisingly, on consumer product analytics. And this paved the way over time, through a number of other jobs, to the company he founded in 2002, which he is today, obviously, the founder and the chief executive officer, which is called CVP, Customer Value Partners. This company is headquartered in Northern Virginia. It began as a technology and management advisory company, and America Online was its first customer. Everybody remember? Young people don't. You've got mail, the online, America Online. Anyway, CVP sought to use advanced technology to drive change in business. And his vision for CVP was and continues to be building a business that's based on a strong culture that aims to drive innovation and change. Currently, the company works in markets that continuously face disruptive change like healthcare and national security. And with operations and analytics at its core, the company helps clients like Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and many others. The company boasts many awards, including being named to the fastest growing company list in the Washington Business Journal, the Inc. 5000. The award with the greatest significance for Anirudh is CVP being named to the top workplaces list in the Washington Post, confirmation that he had succeeded in creating the type of company that he had envisaged at the start. I'm going to end this rather long introduction by just saying two things. First, a double thank you. And the double thank you is one, first, for being here today, and second, with providing funds to SEAS to create an endowed speaker series, which is going to bring to campus speakers focused on change, technology, innovation, entrepreneurship. And we're going to kick this off in about a month, in April, with change agent and former Chief Information Officer of the FCC, David Bray, delivering the keynote address at the opening lecture in this series. Second, I'll note, not too sadly, that the world of medicine may have lost a doctor, but the field of engineering gained a consummate professional and advocate. So, Anirudh, welcome.
I got to set my timer on. For those of you who know a little bit about India and Sanskrit, Anirudh or Anirudh also means the unstoppable one. So if I don't bring my timer with me. Okay, thank you, Dean Dalling. Thank you very much for those kind words. I could barely recognize the individual you were describing. You must employ some great people here who can take what's usually a very dry biography and turn it into something that interesting. I did read that blog, and my family was laughing all evening, said, wow, who's that guy? I mean, but it was mostly accurate. The one part that wasn't accurate, Dean, you'll be surprised to hear, is that my father chose not to encourage my pre-med ambitions, not because he thought I was a superior analyst. It's because he thought I'd be a terrible doctor. So, anyway, so Dean, faculty, students, and colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to be here. It's hard to believe that it's been more than 30 years since I graduated from this place. This building is a beautiful building. We didn't have it on campus back then. We had to hang out in Tompkins Hall, which, great place. And our mainframes were down in we had two. There was one in the basement. There was something new. There was an HP machine, I remember, that I actually did all my punch card studies on, that was up on the top floor. How they got it up there, I have no idea, but that was an engineering feat unto itself. I do want to extend some real appreciation towards you, Dean Dalling. I think under your leadership, this school has really blossomed. I am continuously in awe of all the things that are being achieved here at the school under your leadership and your team of faculty, and I think everybody ought to join me in a little round of applause for you, sir. As an alum, it gives all of us, and I'm sure there are many alums in the audience here today, gives us all great pride to come back to the school and see the accomplishments, the achievements that our colleagues and our students, today's students, are achieving, and it can't be done without great leadership. So I do appreciate that. I'm also taken by something that you mentioned at the last advisory council meeting, and I hope I have the statistics right, but did I hear correctly that there are almost, I think the school enjoys amongst the highest percentages of graduating women engineers in the nation, almost, was it about 41%? That's phenomenal. And as the father of two young professional women who chose not to be engineers, I wish I'd had them come and talk to you, to see more of us and of all types get into science and technology and use that to really drive human progress, I think, is phenomenal, and that's another testament to the school and its focus on promoting women engineers and careers in education in science and technology. I also do want to make one other comment about the showcase. So I did walk around the posters. We didn't have an R&D showcase in my day. I did take some time to walk around and take a look at the various student phenomenal work. And I have to say 90% of what I saw went completely over my head. And I'm not an unintelligent person, so that speaks to how smart all of you are, and your faculty mentors and your advocates here at the school. The amount of diligence and the amount of work you all have done, it's just fantastic, and gives great hope for the future. For those of us that do believe, as I do, that science and technology is at the heart of human progress, seeing that kind of research and applying that research to real-world problems, that's how engineers make their living, and that's why we are so honored in society. So congratulations to all of you who participated. Before I get going, I do want to ask a few questions about the audience. I mean, they sort of tell you in public speaking, know your audience. So I'd like to sort of ask a couple of questions. Show of hands only, please. Students in the crowd? Okay, great, about 60, 70%. How about faculty or, okay, great, faculty, fantastic. We have faculty. Friends of the school, alumni, well-wishers, future investors, prize winner. Okay, all right, here we go. But everybody has, I suspect, a very strong interest in engineering and science. We're a strange breed as engineers, right? We're strange. You know that, right? If somebody asks us, is the glass full or half empty, you know what we say. The glass is twice as big as it needs to be, right? You know, I have a friend who golfs with my younger brother, who in fact did become a physician, giving our family at least one. So he tells a very funny story about engineers. So he, my brother, and they have a friend. So he's an engineer. My brother's a physician, and there's also a friend of theirs that actually went to study religion and is actually now a minister. But the three of them like to play golf. And there's a particular golf course in Pittsburgh where they play called Westwood. So they play at Westwood. They used to do this many years ago. And at Westwood, this one time they were caught behind a very slow-moving foursome in front of them, very slow. And it was clear to these folks that the foursome in front actually couldn't play, or so they thought, because every ball was errant, every ball went out in a direction that was completely, it didn't make any sense. So, you know, they were a little polite for a while, and then at some point they said, come on, we got to get this show moving here. I mean, it's been a couple hours already, and we're on the fourth hole. So they called the marshal. The marshal swings by, and they say, well, what's up with this group in front of us? I mean, can you get them to move along a little bit? So the marshal says, well, you know, it's a really sad story. This is true, by the way, okay? Really sad story. These are Pittsburgh local firemen that were all caught in a burning building trying to save some folks in the building. And unfortunately, because of the flames and the smoke, they all lost their vision. But the club was so grateful to them, and as a show of, and we knew that they all loved to play golf, we decided to extend them the opportunity to play golf at the club anytime they wanted to. So my brother, the physician, says, well, that's really a touching story. I mean, you know, if there's anything I can do from a medical perspective, free clinics, you know, family, whatever, please put me down. The minister says, geez, this is really something. This is fate speaking at a level that we can't, you know, I will say 3 Hail Marys, you know, I'll do the things that I need to do to help these folks achieve, you know, their blessed end. The engineer, why can't they just play at night? That's us. We're practical to the point of being painful. Am I right? We are practical to the point of being painful. Anyway, so, yes, it was a true story. Is there something? No. So, yeah, I did want to, the dean and I did speak for a few minutes on the phone last week. I did want to get a little little bit of coaching on what I should be talking about. So how one gets into this career is sort of always an interesting and unique story. So I did think it might be useful for me to share a little bit about that. So in our family, the tradition always was if you had the ability that you would focus on either medicine or engineering. So I thought medicine and was clearly dissuaded not to. Engineering I hadn't really thought about. I loved math. I was a great math geek. I loved math. I enjoyed that. And I actually thought maybe if I can't do medicine, then maybe mathematics was sort of my path. So Dad, being the consummate practical professional, said, well, math's good. Why don't you try engineering? You'll probably get a job easier with a degree in engineering. So I come to GW not because I necessarily sought GW out, but because I had an aunt who lived in Silver Spring. And I graduated from a high school in Campbellton, New Brunswick, up in Canada. And my mother, who is very attached to me and still is, said, you know what, if you're going to go to school somewhere other than locally, I'd like you to go where we have family. So Silver Spring, Washington, D.C. So I said, all right, let's, in those days we didn't have Google or anything. So it's like I had to go to the library and pick up the manual, pick up the college documents, and we did some research and figured out that there were two good schools in Washington that were interesting. One was Georgetown and one was George Washington. So I said, all right, Georgetown looks kind of cool. And I'm looking through the program portfolio, and I can't find anything to do with engineering in that binder. So I said, okay, all right, well, let's look at this GW thing. So I look at the GW thing, well, it's nice. It's right there near the mall. It's a cool place. Engineering, cool. Okay, Dad, I'm applying to GW. And what helped a lot was GW agreed to pick up my entire board and tuition. So financially, it was sort of a great deal. So I wind up at GW, not really sure about the engineering thing, but very sure about math. And as the dean mentioned, we had to declare at the end of our first year and our major. And I wasn't terribly excited about double E or mechanical or civil or any of the other ones, and I was really worried. And I happened upon this orientation offered by Richard Soland and the chair of the department at the time. It had these great simulations, as you mentioned, and they were really modeling a real business process, what today we would call system dynamics. And it was all animated, and it was on the screen, and I said, what is that? And as I heard it described, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to use math and data to optimize business processes. So that's how I declared, and that's how I got into operations research, and as you said, now today's EMSE, which, by the way, those posters from the EMSE students were probably the only ones I really understood. Really? Okay. But I did want to tell you about the early years at GW. So I stayed at Calhoun Hall, which is today's Lafayette Hall, right on 21st and I. And at the time, the Red Lion Cafe was sort of our go-to place for burgers after midnight. So we'd play Risk down in the common room, and then somebody would get hungry at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that was the only place that was open. So I got introduced to the $2, it was like a buck to get a burger and another 50 cents to get it with fried onions. So that was sort of our deal. So that Tower Records came by. I don't know if people remember Tower Records, but Tower Records, right? Tower Records showed up right in front of my dorm room because it was right on 21st, and boy, that was a happening place. I mean, we'd go there, check out, records and vinyls, and then one day CDs came about, and that was a whole complete, change in electronic equipment that we had. So we had to sort of get used to that change. I also learned my first lesson about the appropriate way to sit in a bar. Odd's Cafe was our local hangout down on 21st. Anybody remember Odd's Cafe? Yeah. So it's no longer. That building's probably been bought by GW. I don't know. So anyway, Odd's Cafe was this great bar, and we'd go, and I got my first lesson. And so I was sitting at the bar. I never really drank too much, so I was just going to impress some people. So I was sitting at the bar, and I was facing the people I was trying to impress, and that's when I got knocked in the back of my head by the bartender, who said, never, ever face the bartender with your back. Always face the bartender. And I said, I didn't know that was a rule, but okay, I got it. So there are a lot of little things like that that are streaming through my head as I sort of think about those early days. I got more serious, of course, junior year. I ran for and got elected president of Tau Beta Pi. Do we have any Tau Bates in the audience? Great. So Tau Beta Pi at the time was the convening honor society for all the student mentorship activity that occurred on campus. And that's when I learned one of my first rules. All of the Tau Bates in the class had picked their courses that they were going to teach and mentor on. Nobody wanted to pick modern physics. Nobody. The hardest course was Modern Physics 16. I still remember that one. So guess what? Leadership is a lonely business. I got to pick modern physics. But that was fun. And I also learned another lesson as president of Tau Beta Pi. The other thing that Tau Beta, the chapter did, was we also hosted the annual Engineering Honors Society dinner. And that was inclusive of all the other majors and their honor societies. And I remember we at the time there was a great beef steak place called Charlie Chang's on 24th. And we had to host. And I wasn't, in spite of my Odds Cafe story, I wasn't really a drinker. I never really drank. So we had to give a toast. I had to give a toast, of course, in an opening set of remarks. And the bartender, the people had been pouring my glass of wine, and I kind of was just sort of drinking because it went down, and I was nervous. So the second lesson is never give a toast when you're past one glass of wine, because all kinds of bad things happen, which is what happened. And I think everyone sort of was chuckling a little bit, but it wasn't a very funny thing. I kind of slurred a lot, and I don't have much of a recollection of my Engineering Honor Society dinner. But therefore, lesson number 2, don't please do that when you're in your own events like that. Thank you. I see a lot of head nodding. I see a lot of experienced people over there. So graduating from GW, I had a couple of different choices. I picked TRW, as you said. After 3 years, I kind of got itchy feet. And there was something in me that felt like I needed to do something on my own. And I wasn't quite sure what, so I left. And a very dear friend of mine was an MBA student, had just graduated as an MBA student, and he was working for a big consumer products company. And the big problem in those days was, how do you predict how much money to spend on advertising for a certain amount of sales value? So if I'm selling Vicks throat lozenges, and if I want to increment sales by 10%, how much money in advertising should I be spending by television, radio, point of sale, so on and so forth? To me, it all seemed like a big math problem, a big decision math. So that was the first company I started, which essentially absorbed and took in data from previous sales and advertising history, tried to come up with a model that predicted the future, and did a pretty good job. And PCs had just come out, so the PC was becoming a big deal, and young brand managers wanted applications that would work on PCs. My application did, and it sort of took off, and a couple years later I sold that business to a larger systems company that I felt would take care of those customers a little bit better than I could as a two-person shop. So that got me into it. I loved it, but I also realized I had some necessary remedial instruction. I didn't know anything about business. I knew how to build a product. I knew how to technically develop it. I even knew how to talk about it. I even knew how to sell it. I even knew what its value proposition was. But I didn't know about all the other things. How do you run a business? How do you inspire people to follow you? How do you build a team? How do you think about what's next? Because that product's going to dry up pretty soon, and you've got to fill in the funnel. There's a lot of things that have to do with business. So hold that thought. We'll come back to it in a second. I went to work after that for a company called SRA right here in Alexandria. Today, SRA is part of General Dynamics is what I just heard. They went through a combination with CSC Consulting, and then most recently, in the last week, they became a part of General Dynamics. But SRA in those days was a very small company, about 100 people or so, and I ended up learning a lot about the internet. And early 90s, early to mid 90s, and it was just mind-blowing to see what folks like Mark Andreessen and all these folks out on the West Coast were doing. I met many of them while I was at SRA, brought that ideation back to the company, and I said to Ernst Volgenau, some of you know Ernst Volgenau, who's the CEO and founder of SRA, I said, Ernst, we got to get into this thing. And to Ernst's credit, he supported me. He said, what do you need? And within 18 months, I had built a practice at SRA with companies like Simon & Schuster and Chicago Tribune and Washington Post and New York Times and Business Week. And these, for those of you who know SRA, SRA was a government services company back in the day. All of these were the first private sector clients that SRA ever had. And it made me very popular with the upper management at SRA. And a few years after that, after unsuccessfully trying to convince SRA to spin that business out into its own independent company, I ended up leaving in '97, and I was going to start my own company again. But instead, I fell in with some rogues from KPMG Consulting, and that's a bit of an interesting ride and story as well. So at the time, 1997, the big accounting firms, Accenture, Andersen, E&Y, Deloitte, many companies that you all are probably interviewing with, were all going through a separation of accounting from consulting. And KPMG leadership on the consulting side wanted to do the same thing, had been told no. So the top 15 partners decided to leave anyway. They raised about $20 million in private equity, didn't know anything about the internet, knew that the internet was going to be something big. I ran into these guys, brought me on as one of the early founders, and within 4 years, we built a $300 million revenue company. We were on 3 continents. We employed 3,000 people. We went public in 1998. At the time we went public, we were the fastest high-tech IPO after Netscape, for those of you who remember Netscape. Netscape had gone public in 10 months. We went public in 13. We had revenues of hardly $100 million at the time, and we were worth $1.5 billion. You know, for somebody who focuses on math, that made no sense to me. But hey, I wasn't going to object if that's the way the investors think about things. But it was a great ride, and we grew a very big business. I ended up running the Mid-Atlantic for AnswerThink. I was also the global practice leader for IT strategy, and I was on the firm's committee. I was the leader in charge of all of our merger integration. I tell you these stories because they become important in terms of what I've learned about business going forward. So I left AnswerThink, started CVP. I took a year off, started CVP, Customer Value Partners. We're heading into our 15th year now, so it's been the longest stint I've enjoyed anywhere. CVP is about a 350 person team. We're a team of data scientists and analysts and technologists and cultural change agents and process remediation folks and process innovators. And we do some very interesting work in the areas of healthcare and national security, as the Dean mentioned. We also, because true to our entrepreneurial heart, we've been a serial spin-out team as well. So we spun out a company a couple of years ago that's probably about 800 folks now, which specializes in customer service operations and outsourcing. And just last year, we incubated a firm, which is very cool for those of you who like to shop. So Pixt Fashion, P-I-X-T, just launched last week. And Pixt uses machine learning and image recognition technology to find pictures of an article of clothing that you might have taken a picture of and find stores close by with product that's similar. Price, how far is it from where you are, and so on. So it's launched in New York right now because it's a bit of a retail haven in New York, but of course the plan is to expand more broadly than that. So it's this concept of coming up with new things, I think, is endemic to my philosophy, and everything has been about technology and entrepreneurship as a guide. So I did want to sort of make a few final comments about things that I've learned. I did promise that I would talk about that. One is my very first job I was fired from. It was right here at GW. I was a resident, what do you call it, the desk monitor, you know, not an RA, but all I had to do, the simplest job in the world, just keep my eyes open and be the receptionist at the front desk of the dorm. And I took the midnight slot, and I fell asleep, and when I woke up, I forgot that I had to return the keys to a particular lockbox, and 3 hours later, I get a call from administration, and I'm fired. It burned. The reason I tell that story to people, even today, is that failure can be a huge motivator, okay? Every time I tell that story, I remember the bitter shame that I experienced, and I will never let myself forget that. It has forced me to be far more attentive and far more particular because guess what? You don't want that. You don't want to be thinking about that. So that's sort of number one, embrace failure. Number two, no job is too small. All of us graduating all want to change the world, don't we? We want to solve world hunger. I saw some posters that are going to cure cancer and all this. I mean, and these are all worthy things. The real world is not always as sizzling as what you think. And I think what's really important is to understand that there's no job too small to do a good job at. I have a story to go with that, but my timer says I'm past 20 minutes, so I'm not going to continue with that story. Integrity and making commitments is my final comment. So we're engineers. We have great ideas. It's really important to think about making commitments and following through on commitments, because that in the real world is what counts. So ideas, trust me, are easy. It's the execution and the delivery of that with high integrity that really matters. And then the final point I do want to make is the art, as technologists and as technical people, we don't have a lot of patience for people who don't, quote, get it. Am I right? I mean, it's obvious, right? Why isn't it obvious? I mean, you should know what I'm talking about. We fall into this trap all the time. And out in the real world, people are not, they don't either get it, they don't care enough, okay? And it's our job to understand how to communicate. Because if we want our ideas to sell, the most important thing you can do is learn how to persuade, how to motivate, how to inspire. Because nothing can get done with a team of one. So if I trace back and I'm not, I have a long way still to go in my career, but whatever has helped me thus far, of all the things that have, I think it has been the ability to understand and be empathetic and to scale back what I am saying to make sure that I resonate with the individual on the other side and get them to do what I need them to do to help us all succeed. So that's really just a couple of things that I thought I'd end with. I do have one final comment I'll leave you with, and school is all about acquiring knowledge. We're learning things, we're picking up knowledge. There's a critical difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? As somebody said to me, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in fruit salad. Go make great fruit salad. Thank you.